Good day and welcome. Welcome to all the exporters, companies, colleagues, friends, peers who are interested in exporting to Mexico and using your website to do so to help you grow your sales, your exports, your brands and businesses in Mexico. We're really delighted to be here today to talk about websites, online marketing strategies, all of that one can use to grow your business in Mexico. So we have a lot to talk about today. We've got a very packed content here, a lot to review. So I'm going to get started right away. Just while the last of you are logging on, I can see there's a bit of a tail coming for people registering for the webinar. I was going to do some quick housekeeping sort of things. So just on housekeeping, we have been doing this now for about 4 years, these webinars, and there is a very large backlog of webinars that you can browse through if you're interested in other markets or on other parts of website localization. Today's webinar on exporting to Mexico and using online tools to do so will be about 45 minutes long. We've left some time at the end for questions and answers. We would really love any questions and answers that you have, sorry. We'll do the answer, you do the questioning. Just drop them into the chat box. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should have a chat box. Just drop them in there and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. We've also got a little handout for you, a Mexico online infographic, which we're gonna give you later in terms of the handout. Also, we're gonna have about 3 polls, 3 questions we wanna ask you during the webinar, and we would really appreciate if you could participate. Just click on the answer that suits you best. After the webinar, we will have a very, very, very brief survey. It literally lasts, 15 seconds, but we would appreciate if you could take the time after the webinar closes to stay on the line. The survey will pop up on your screen. Just answer it. It helps us design better webinars in the future, helps us understand what your needs are, and how we can sort of focus more on what you need and what you want to do. There will be also a recording of the slide deck and the webinar in your inbox, in your email on Friday. So therefore, you don't even have to take notes. You can just sit back, enjoy, and then you can either share or listen to the webinar again if there are points that you want to get onto it. So without further ado, let's just introduce ourselves. So starting off, my name is Susanna Hardy, and I'm Chief Content Officer at IBT Online. And I guess my title, Chief Content Officer, CCO, reflects the fact that content is now so important for your online presence. Really is key to making sure that you have building buyers' trust, building your visibility online, and so on. So I'm delighted to be here today to talk about Mexico and the online presence that we can have with that. And joining me, I'm really delighted that Samantha Sofici is joining me. She's our Online Business Development Manager. Samantha is based in Florida and speaks Spanish fluently, and therefore it's a great help with our Mexican businesses the Mexican websites that we run. Samantha has a marketing degree, a master's degree in marketing, and has been a great asset for companies looking to grow their businesses with websites and online marketing. Now, a brief word also about IBT Online. IBT Online has been around since 2002. IBT stands for International Business and Technologies. We are 100% focused on delivering websites and online tools like online marketing for companies that want to go internationally. So if you're in the international space, the online space, then that's where you'll find us. We're very proud also to work with directly with a lot of U.S. states. We have 18 U.S. state programs that we run for various states that allow companies to have to access some grant money as well to get the online tools they need for their international ambitions. So there we go, that's us. Also, perhaps just to say, we're a US company, but we have some offices abroad as well. I'm actually sitting in the UK, Samantha's sitting in Florida, and so on. So today's agenda, just so that we can talk about this right away, today's agenda, we've split it up, Samantha and I have sort of split it up into 5 big sections. Going to have a very brief, sort of big, broad brush sweep on sort of Mexico business in general. And then we're going to look at the actual features of why we believe you need a website for your to expand your exports into Mexico, and then drill down on what specific features and characteristics those websites might have, and then talk about online marketing and give you examples of Mexican websites, and finally takeaways and some question time. So without further ado, let's talk about Mexico business opportunities. And Samantha, perhaps you could run through this one. Samantha?
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining. So first, let's talk about why Mexico. And the first reason is because Mexico is one of the top 3 U.S. trade partners. Since April 2019, it was the first time since 2005 that Mexico is #1 in being a trade partner with the U.S. And I know this is from April, but it was confirmed for the first 6 months of 2019. So it is just a hugely important partner for the U.S. And so they've traded actually about $309 billion worth of goods, and that's just about 15% of U.S. trade. So obviously super important for small to medium-sized companies who are looking to export and do business outside of the U.S. So moving on to the next slide, just to kind of re-emphasize. So 26 U.S. states depend on Mexico for their first or second destination for exports. And there is more than $1 billion a day in two-way trade between the 2 countries. So this is why people were really tuned into what's happening with NAFTA. This is why, I mean, it's just a very convenient place to export because it is a very open market. And also because it's proximity. I mean, it's close by, and it's an easy market to do business with. And that kind of brings us to the next slide, which just looking at the basics. So Mexico is the 15th largest economy in the world, and actually the 2nd largest in Latin America. It is large, it has a diverse labor pool, and it is focused on manufacturing. It's actually one of the top 10 producers of automobiles in the world, and it exports went up 62% from 2009 until now. So very active, very dynamic country. And like I mentioned, they're a very open economy. They actually have 11 free trade agreements with 46 countries. So they are focused on import, export, and really allowing for trade internationally. And this just kind of goes to show these kind of trends is just amounting to this forecast where the economists, these forecasts published by Bloomberg and The Economist, they think that Mexico will become the 8th largest economy in the world by 2050. And not only that, but it will also become one of the most populous. So it'll be the 11th most populous country by 2050 with 146 million inhabitants. So it's important to start entering the country now, be part of this movement, be part of this growth in Mexico.
Samantha, thank you very much for that. Before we start looking at reasons about websites in particular, I actually want to launch our very first poll. So what I'd like to do is just launch that poll and say, please click on the answer that corresponds best with you. Are you already doing business in Mexico? Are you thinking about it? Are you doing it online, offline, both? You know, do you have subsidiaries there and you're online as well? Do you have distributors there and you have an online presence? Or just thinking about it? Well, I'm still collecting a couple of answers here, but I can give you some feedback. The vast majority of you are already doing business, some business in Mexico, but hardly any of you have Mexican websites and online presence. So that's perfect for this webinar. I'm very happy about that. And some of you are also thinking about it, still looking at exporting to Mexico, but the vast majority of you are already already in Mexico, doing business in Mexico, but very few of you have websites. Perfect. That's perfect for this webinar. Great. Good to have you all here. So now let's talk a little bit about why we think it's important for exporters to have a Mexican website. In fact, why is it important for exporters to have websites at all? Let's first talk about that. And I thought I would just highlight this slide here, these numbers. Hootsuite produced this every year, and it's an amazing resource for people like ourselves to have a look at. It shows the digital online presence around the world. So as we know, the world is very populated, 7.7 billion people. And of that, 57%, nearly 4.5 billion people in the world today, on the planet today, are hooked up on the internet. And when we talk about internet penetration, we don't just mean that someone goes on the internet every now and then, or that a house has internet access. We mean that those 4.4 billion people go on the internet every day, that they use the internet actively. You'll see as well that the vast majority of them are also on social media, 3.5 billion, and are using it via their mobile phone, 3.2 billion. So these numbers just show you the global, the world, as it were, and a snapshot, the world online. So when you think, oh, here I am sitting in, you know, Chicago, and I just feel like the internet is just so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I have it all day at work, and then I'm emailing, and then I'm looking at my phone, and my kids are on their phone all the time. Well, guess what? Pretty well the rest of the world is too, which really has made a paradigm shift for the way companies do business. And I think it's, you know, it's interesting how the internet has shifted the importance and the centrality of the customer. The customer now wants what he wants, when he wants it, how he wants it to be delivered in that way. So the customer is centric now to anyone's business model, and that's B2B and B2C. And you, if you're in charge of marketing and sales for your company, then your business is to make sure that you are positively influencing those little black arrows that go from customer to customer, or customer to competitor, or whatever. So those little black arrows, customer to customer, you want to sort of, you know, wave, you know, give a little bit of a shout out every now and then. You want to just say, hoo, I'm here, me company, remember me, come and buy from me, and trust me, and have a good experience with my website, and find me. So you want customers to find you, to understand you, and to do business with you. And that's how the web has changed the world. And I think that this is actually more important for exporters than it is for your domestic market. Because in your domestic market, your customers, you already have some brand recognition. You already have some you know, an existing client base. But if you're going into an export market, perhaps for the first time, how do you break into that market? Well, the best way you can break into that market, the best way that people can become aware of you, learn to like you, learn to trust you, is via your website. And that's why we think websites are an essential tool for exporters today. Let me start also in terms of let me sort of call back a second, a little bit in terms of the basics of the web. Why is the customer centric? What is it about the web and the way we access the web that has made the customer so central to the whole thing? Well, for that, I think we have to look at how search engines work. search engines are essentially localized. In other words, they take the searcher at the center. So Google in the US or Google in the UK is not the same. And it's not the same as Google in Mexico. And that's Google. There are other search engines too. There's Yandex in Russia and Baidu in China and things like that. Naver in South Korea. The big one of the world is Google. And for our purposes today, Google is important. Mexico, Google has about a 96% market share for search engines in Mexico. So you need to make sure, if you want to have a good Mexican website, you need to make sure that Google Mexico likes you. Not necessarily google.co.uk in the UK, or even google.com, which is going to be your search engine in the United States. So by localized, we mean that they put the customer, the searcher in this case, at the center. So they decide, Google decides what it is relevant, what is relevant and of importance to that searcher. So if I'm in Mexico and I am looking for any product, I will go on to Google Mexico. I will type things in to Google Mexico in Mexican Spanish, and Google Mexico will think, what is it? Let's see, the companies they're looking for. Well, that person's looking for something that's in Mexico, that's going to be relevant to that person, that's going to be close by, and so on. So if you've got a little website, if you've got a US website, for example, and you're sitting in Nebraska, if you stick a Spanish page onto that Nebraska-based website, Google Mexico will not think that you are relevant for Mexicans, because it is not localized. So when you think of Google, you can think of it as 192 different Googles, each one specific for that country. Now, Samantha and I did something a bit silly. We just looked at 2 different searches. Samantha sitting in Florida. Actually, she was in Wisconsin when she did this. But anyway, she typed in red shoes, and me sitting in London, I typed in red shoes. So Samantha, at the time in Wisconsin, said, google.com, what do I get when I type in red shoes? And she got things from Macy's and Zappos and Nordstrom. And me sitting in London, I went google.co.uk, that's my search engine here in London. I said red shoes, Debenhams and House of Fraser and Zalando and M&S, very different retailers, very different outcomes. Same search engine, same words, different results. And that is because Google is localized. Google said, Samantha, you're in Wisconsin. Susanna, you're in London. You have different priorities, different requirements. And what about social media? Well, guess what? Social media is the same. Social media is localized. Facebook, think of Facebook as over 100 different Facebooks in the world. Oh, it's available in over 100 languages. Same for WhatsApp, Instagram, and so on. And Facebook in particular, and WhatsApp and Instagram, the family of Facebook, are incredibly important when you start looking out and wanting to interact in Mexico and Latin America. So just so that you understand again, the search engines are localized, and therefore also the social media platforms are localized. They take the searcher at the center. They take the client or customer at the center and decide what's important for them. So, if you're putting out material in English, you're not necessarily going to reach your target audience. Put it the other way around. If you were Mexican and wanted to reach, say, a UK audience, would you put your products out in Spanish? No, you turn them into English. Let's take an example now about some words and keywords. And again, this is interesting as well. Remember, we said that markets have to be very specific. Here's an example of a keyword. In this case, the word for car. In Spain is different from Mexican Spanish. So if one of the important words for your business is car, let's say you're in the auto parts manufacturing businesses or something like that, if you were to use the word coche, which is the Spanish word for car, you would only have 27% of the people actually even looking on the internet in Mexico. And if you were, and conversely, if you were looking to target the Spanish market and use the word auto as for Mexican Spanish, only about 9% of people searching for car in Spanish in Spain use the word auto. So make sure that you have the right keywords for the right markets. And again, this is just an example of localization and specification. So for the Mexican market, you want Mexican keywords. This webinar is not about website localization. We have other assets for that. So I've listed just on one slide all the different criteria that define localization. And there's 10 criteria that I've listed here. And you know, if anyone wants to have questions about them, please, you know, just reach out. We'll do that. But I just wanted to show you registered domain name. That's .mx for Mexico. It's mobile enabled. The design's adapted. It's optimized for the local search engine. It's hosted locally, and so on. So although those features, all the criteria is for localized websites. Now, before we start talking about, and I hand the mic back over to Samantha to talk about Mexico online, I would like to launch another poll. This one, just quickly asking you, do you have localized websites for your export markets? Do you already do this? Do you have localized websites that you work with for your international export markets? You know, are they hosted locally, the right domain names, and so on and so on? I can again give you a little bit of feedback. We're still getting some polls still in progress. We're still collecting some responses, but I give you some feedback. Almost none of you have it for all your export markets. The majority of you have it for a few export markets. Well, actually, it's not evenly split. A few export markets and thinking about it. So we're happy that you're thinking about it, and well done you for already getting it there for a few of your export markets. All right, I'm going to close this poll and turn back to Samantha as we start looking deeper into Mexico online and what it is about a Mexico website that is so specific. Samantha?
Yeah, thank you. So just a quick look at Mexico in general and why it's so important to be online. First off, Mexico is huge. It is 3 times the size of Texas, to put that into relative terms. However, it's pretty concentrated. So 60% of the internet use is contained within 3 cities. And actually only 5 cities compose 95% of US exports. Also, something that's important to note is that the demographics, about 30% of the Mexican population are under 18, which we can use for internet forecasts. Obviously, millennials and the next generation, they're very online, very internet focused. They trust social media and websites much more than older generations. So it's important for companies to take advantage of this and make sure to have that online presence in Mexico. It's also, because of these really complex supply chains, it also favors online so that everything's centralized and organized. So looking specifically to Mexico and the Mexican online kind of situation. So out of the total population, 88 million people, not percent, are internet users, which is about 67% of the total population. And the same amount of people are active social media users. So this means it's not, you know, the grandma that logs onto her Facebook, you know, once every 3 months to check on her grandkids. These are people who are actively going on these social media platforms and interacting with one another. Something important to note is Google actually has a 93% market share in Mexico, so it's really important to have those localized websites that are catered to Google and its algorithm, because that's the search engine that most of the people in Mexico are using. And just to put that 67% of internet users and 67% of active social media users into perspective, the of people in the US that are on the internet is 80%. So 67% is a pretty significant number. And looking also at the increases on the, I know it's not mentioned on this slide, but it is important to take a look at the trends. So from January 2018 to January 2019, users increased by 3.5%. So 3 million more people went online. Social media increased by 6%. So 5 million more people got on social media. And mobile social media users, so people who are accessing it via their cell phones, their iPhones, Blackberries, whatever the case may be, they increased by 7.7%. So 6 million more people are mobile social media users. So the trend is increasing, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon, especially with that demographic. So then taking a look at the next slide, so looking at the social media overview. So 88 million, like I said, are active social media users. 64% are mobile. And this is important to note because they're spending a lot of time with this media. The average amount time spent on the internet daily, the average is 8 hours a day. So a third of their day is spent in front of a screen. And the average daily time spent on social media is 3 hours. So this includes YouTube, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those major messaging and social media networks. They're spending about 3 hours a day talking to each other and looking at companies and interacting and buying things. So it's really important to take advantage of all of the screen time that people in Mexico are using, not just for personal use, but also for their business. And take advantage of it and be present in that market, be localized, get on social media and talk to people in Mexico because, it's working. And then we're going to take a quick look at e-commerce in Mexico. So not only for B2C, but also B2B, although the B2B numbers are a little bit harder to capture, the trend is the same, that e-commerce is growing. Retail increased by 25% and services increased by 25%. And it's actually Latin America's largest market in terms of e-commerce. So if that's a space that you're interested in, it's very, very important to have the localized presence for Mexico because it is increasing, it is growing, people are becoming more and more comfortable with it, they have more access to the internet, supply chains are becoming a little bit, although complicated, they're able to reach more places. So these to keep in mind when looking at different strategies to enter Mexico. And then looking at the social media. So the most active social media platform is YouTube. Second is Facebook, and then third is WhatsApp. This can be kind of surprising to some people. Most people think, okay, largest social media network, Facebook for sure. But YouTube has a huge presence in Mexico and actually all over the world. It's the second most visited site globally, and it's actually the second most popular search engine, quote unquote, which is kind of interesting. People love to watch videos. People love to learn from videos and be entertained by videos. So we always encourage people to create videos for your company, and it's actually really simple to put some subtitles on there, make it accessible to people in Mexico, in Latin America, and in other international markets. So that one video that you spent a lot of time and resources on can be stretched and can be used for markets all over the world. We actually have an infographic that goes into further detail about the social media platforms in Mexico, which is the handout that will be available by the end of this webinar. So what are the key takeaways from this whole section that I just kind of rambled on about Mexico and its online environment? So 2/3 of the population, which is about 88 million active internet users, are at your fingertips and available to be marketed to. They're extremely engaged with social media, so spending about 3 hours a day interacting with people and interacting with businesses and talking to each other. It's a very mobile market, so the majority of people who are on social media are accessing it via mobile. Google has 93% of the market share, so being optimized and being in best practice for Google Mexico is key to enter the market and to actually be found by the people that are on the internet in Mexico. It's important to have a .mx domain name, and that's just for a few reasons, but mostly because of the search engine, because of Google. Google will recognize that a website is designated for the Mexican market when you have that .mx domain name. Dynamic e-commerce and growing. So if you're in that e-commerce space and you're interested in selling e-commerce into Mexico, this is a great time to enter the market because it is growing and it's going to continue to grow. And it's important to use Mexican Spanish. So my Spanish in Argentina, for example, might use different terms, different colloquialisms, different phrases from Mexico. And you also want to distinguish yourself from the Spanish used in Spain, because as we saw by the example before, auto versus coche, your choice of words and that keyword research really does make a difference when people are trying to find your products and to be able to do business with you. So that's why it's important to have the Mexican localized websites.
Samantha, thank you so much. That was a great summary, and I hope it was clear. I can see there's quite a few questions we're going to be answering at the end, but we'll look forward to that. I'm going to give you some examples now of Mexican websites, online marketing. Some of the things that you can see how other exporters, other mid-cap companies, mid-sized companies are going about growing their businesses in Mexico using online tools. And by the way, if you want further information on any of those, we have a lot of this on our website. So if you go to our website, which is IBT online, and then go to the testimonials and success cases, there's a lot of videos and clients talking about their individual experiences in terms of building global brands. Some of them are also talking about Mexico in particular, but scroll through and you'll start to see some about Mexico and about how they wanted to go, or, what it meant for them to have localized websites and online marketing. So just to say, if you want to hear it from the client's perspective, please go on our website and check that out. But I wanted to give you some examples of websites that we've been really pleased with our clients to help them get their online presence in Mexico. Now, this is a U.S. company, Sealight, and they operate on a global basis because they produce. I mean, they're at the heart of international. They produce all kinds of solutions, lighting solutions for water, for waterways, for inland water, for ports, for boats, for tugboats, all kinds of things, lighthouses. And although they had some international parts of their website, they really decided to focus to grow their website, their web presence, market by market, starting off with their two top prospective markets, which is Mexico and Brazil. So building that, we wanted to make sure it was very similar to the US in terms of look and feel, but that it was fully localized into the local markets, either Mexico or Brazil. And one of the interesting things about that was just saying, this is a company that goes into a lot of different industry verticals, from ports to boats to lighthouses to intercoastal ways. So they sell to a lot of different sort of prospective buyers. It was very important to have really strong visuals, for example, and especially so. And that's one of the main reasons that one of the main things that they found on their on their website was to have very strong visuals. In part also because they have, they want to be sort of present or in someone's mind when that order comes through, because they are typically clients as well who don't order often, but when they do, it's a major order. So they sort of lumpy stuff. So you've got to be, first in mind, front of mind when it comes to, port renovation and so on. So those are the two markets they chose, Brazil and Mexico, for starting off with. I wanted then to show you another type of website. This is for a company. Actually, it's a Florida company, and they started out with doing two. They've done actually a whole series of websites, international websites now with us, and it's really been fantastic to see the returns that they've had. And so they've just expanded it. Every year they put another 2 or 3 websites on. In fact, France is actually going live tomorrow, but I thought I'd put it there in today's slideshow. The type of website that they want is really what I would call almost like a brochure, but an online brochure. They work with in-market partners very often. So, all those markets like in Mexico or in China or, Brazil or whatever, they'll have an in-market partner. And that in-market partner is really good at, finding the leads, chasing up the leads, doing after sales, doing all that. But he's not necessarily a strong engineer. And it was really important then that the company have a website that that they basically gave to those in-market partners as a resource and said, hey, distributor or in-market partner, use this as an effective tool when you're making your sales. And it had a very strong impact right away. The in-market partners were then able to show the technical people on their client base or their technical prospective clients and communicate much better about exactly what the product was. So although the website looks quite static in the sense that it looks like a brochure one, but it is very much used and it was created for the in-market partners in each case. So I think that's a good example of something that we see quite regularly. This is a different example. It's a company where they said, right, well, we are in an industry which has a lot of competition, a lot of, how do we differentiate ourselves across these big markets? And we were able to build sites for them in a lot of different countries, the UK, France, Australia, and also Mexico. And the objective of the websites is to drive traffic and to increase brand recognition. So when someone thinks of motor oil, they don't think of motor oil, they think of AMSOIL for their cars or their motorbikes. And then they drive traffic to the local in-market partner who's the distributor for that in that, for example, the Mexican market. So again, these websites were created for the local distributors to be used by them, but also for the company to increase brand recognition. And one of the key ways of doing that is obviously to use the website in online marketing. In the case of AMSOIL, through social media and particularly through creating blogs and Facebook campaigns for them. So, when we're creating a blog for AMSOIL, for example, we're doing it, in conjunction with them, obviously. Doing the keyword research, getting the right message across, getting the right sort of causal into that market. And this is an example of just saying, okay, we're going to create a blog for AMSOIL, for the Latin America and Mexico markets in particular, then push it out onto Facebook. And it is, it's significant. It's really amazing to see the reaction in Latin America versus other markets for social media. It is incredibly responsive market. A lot of that is just sort of what I call vanity metrics. It's lots of likes and likes and likes. But it certainly does impact the brand recognition part of the objective. So, the objective was a very clear mission: drive what are called mid-funnel traffic to the blog, which we did, boosting keyword organic searches for AMSOIL and for motor oil and synthetic oil, and then looking at the different metrics and seeing how that was performing and whether it was doing well or not, and then learning from it. So the sort of the classic online marketing and for social media. And I think as Samantha has shown you, Mexico is a very, very plugged in, reactive market to social media. And anyone looking at having a strong web presence there should really be thinking of in tandem a social media presence as well. And it's important. So just moving on, I can see there's a lot of questions coming in on this side too. Maybe I'll just launch my final poll. How about that? The final poll is: do you use social media to promote your business today? Do you use social media? Are you thinking about it? Do you do it in your home market, in your key export markets, in all of your export markets? Have you looked at? Okay, I'll give you some responses. I think it's pretty evenly split between your home market and your key export markets, and only in your home markets. Hardly any of you, just a very, very few, have social media in your home market and in all of your export markets. But it's evenly split, home market and key export markets. So very happy about that. Great. Let's do a sort of a roundup, and then also talk about some of the questions you've been putting in. So I guess if there's a couple of takeaways that we wanted you to have for this webinar, the first is more sort of a general one, as I hope I was able to explain about search engines and how customer-centric the web is. It therefore means that you have to have localized websites if you want to be found in the various export markets that you're targeting. In this case, Mexico. So if you want to get found, if you want to be understood by your target market, and if you want to do business with them, then you need to have a localized web presence, which allows those things. The localized presence builds the trust that you need for that buyer's journey. I think, as we said, everybody now really is on the web. So all of your clients, all of your prospects, all of your future employees, your future distributors, they are all online. You can find them through your online presence, or get them to find you through your online presence. That's why localized websites are so important for exporters. And what about Mexican websites? What about the successful buyer's journey in Mexico? Well, we talked about Google, and we talked about .mx, the Google search engine, which is so powerful in Mexico with 96% market share. The .mx, which is the clear country domain name, which allows Google to really find you there. So, your website should look something like yourbusiness.mx. And you should really think from the very start about online marketing and social media, because it is such a reactive market and is such an online focused and social media market, especially WhatsApp and Facebook and YouTube. In terms of localization, I think we discussed that as well. The key points to remember are your keywords. The keywords are really vital in Mexico. And it's not just Spanish as you would have in Spain or Argentina. It's, you've got to make sure that they're working well for you in Mexican Spanish. Remember also that there's a couple of things that make it obviously localized. If you're talking about money, use Mexican pesos. Remember that Mexico has the metric system, not the imperial, so that you're talking centimeters here, not feet. Host it locally so that you can be uploaded and downloaded quickly and efficiently. And then make sure that you have compliance, that you are regulated and compliant, particularly online compliance. So those are the key takeaways that we wanted to have here, where we're pretty well on time. I do note that there are a lot of questions coming in. I hope that we can address some of them now. So I'm going to start with Samantha. Samantha, I'm going to lob this question over to you. which is basically we have a distributor in Mexico, and our Mexican distributor does all of our online work. You know, is this why is this not a good thing? Is this a good thing or not? That's actually combining two questions, but anyway.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and we get a lot of companies that are in that similar situation. Ideally, it's better for you to take it for you to take your online presence into your own hands. That way you can control the messaging, and that way you can control your brand. Because sometimes distributors, just the way that they work, they put either a competitor next to you, or you know, they do the translation and it's not exactly the messaging that you want to portray for your brand. So ideally, it's great to have a localized website, and what we can do is we can actually put your distributor's website as a link, so that when someone actually wants to do the purchasing, they do it through your distributor. So we're not stepping on anybody's toes, and we're actually working together with your distributor to increase your sales in the Mexican market.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much, Samantha. There's a question which I'm going to take, which is, again, this is combining two questions that are out there I can see, and I'm basically combining that. Can my Mexican website handle all of Central America? Can I have one website for all of Central America? The answer is sort of yes and no. The answer is yes, your Mexican website can stretch beyond the pure border, particularly if the keywords are the same in, say, Ecuador or in Belize or something than it is in Panama, than it is in Mexico. Then there will be some crossover. You know, some of the Central American countries in particular are small enough that Google will say, well, okay, we'll allow the .mx to have some good penetration right here too. So yes, you will have some stretch into the rest of Central America. Nevertheless, if a market is really vital for you, if you say, you know, we have huge prospects in, you know, Belize. Belize should be a fantastic market for us. Then it's probably worth having a separate website just for Belize. If a market is really important for you, then those clients are important, those prospects are important, and they deserve their own website. But if your resources are stretched, you say, okay, Mexico's the key one, but you know, sometimes we can serendipitously get some extra clients from nearby markets, then yes, the Mexico, a .mx will stretch a little bit beyond those Mexican, pure Mexican borders. Samantha, the next one's for you. I'm really interested in the videos, Mexican videos. Can they be in English, or do they have to be in Mexican Spanish? Can I use subtitles? There's 3 questions about videos for Mexico. Samantha.
Yeah, great question. So ideally, obviously, if you can have if Mexico is your main market, Mexico is the place that you want to export to. If you have a video in Mexican Spanish for the Mexican market, that is, you know, gold standard. However, if obviously resources, time, money, whatever the case may be, can be a limited factor. So you can have an English video with Mexican Spanish subtitles, and that'll also get the job done. So just depending on what your goals are and what your resources are, you can either do a full-on Mexican Spanish video or an English video with Mexican Spanish subtitles, and that'll do the job.
Thanks, Samantha. I have another one also about WhatsApp. How can WhatsApp be used for online marketing? And that's actually a huge question, and we address that in online marketing specific webinars. But just to give you a snippet of information there, WhatsApp is incredibly important in Mexico, and it's actually true for most of Latin America as well. And you know, a Mexican person can well have 30 different WhatsApp groups. That's not unusual at all. And the reason is that very often people will go on social media like WhatsApp for search. So rather than going to Google Google in Mexico, they'll add, where can I find the best, whatever. They'll go on to WhatsApp groups and say, where can I find the best, whatever, or they'll go on to Facebook. And so they'll use social media as a search engine as well. And that's what Samantha was mentioning as well when she was talking about the social media. And WhatsApp tends to be really key and vital for that. But there are lots of other questions that I'm seeing as well. I am respectful of our time, though. We did say we would be 45, 50 minutes, and it's now 50 minutes. There's quite a few questions about e-commerce. What I can say is that we will be getting back to you directly in answer to this. So it just leaves me to say thank you also for attending. Thank you, Samantha, for joining me. And please, please, please answer our survey. It's just at the end of this when I close this webinar. And at that point as well, you can also pick up that handout about the Mexico online infographic that's attached to this webinar. Thank you so much. Happy exporting to Mexico. And we hope that you enjoyed our webinar, and see you online soon. Bye, everybody.